As entrepreneurs, we all have a reason why we chose to leave our 9 to 5 for an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm here to capture those stories of why we all hustle and grind for our companies. Lindsay is the founder and moss boss of Green Wallscapes, a company that transforms spaces with preserved moss art. With over 1,000 projects in 35 states, Canada, and the Caribbean, her mostly female team creates lavish expressions of botanical joy from their West Palm Beach studio. Featured in Architectural Digest and Veranda magazine, Green Wallscapes won gold at the 2023 iPlants Magazine Biophilic Design Awards and participated in the 2019 Kips Bay Decorator Show House. Lindsay's clients include major developers and brands like Amazon, Starbucks, and Hilton. She has a diverse background in organic produce, construction, commercial real estate, and book publishing. A Northwestern University graduate, Lindsay lives in West Palm Beach with her husband, John, and their daughter, Skylar. She enjoys traveling, painting, yoga, and jet skiing. So, Lindsay, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I think we had an entire other podcast just before we got on because we got to talking, but I'm so incredibly happy to have you on the podcast today. You are also the very first, I'd like to mention first whenever I start the podcast, and you are the first person that speaks fluent Italian. So there's the first for today. You are also the first person that I have had on the podcast that calls herself the Moss Boss. So we're going to get into that a little bit. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so much fun.
Absolutely. So, Moss Boss, I think a lot of times we have different opinions on moss. And I think a lot of times we also have seen those big walls, the wallscapes and stuff like that. The first time I ever saw one, I thought they were just really cool. And it's just something that, they bring some life into a space and that, but that's your main thing. That's your ninja skill. That's what you're good at, are these walls. How did that happen? How did you get into this space?
Everyone's like, how did you grow a business with 10 employees and a 2,500 square foot studio with moss walls? Mm-hmm. Well, it started like, I think the way that most businesses start, which is totally by accident. Mm-hmm. I literally went online. I was looking at Pinterest in 2016, 2017. And I was like, those moss walls are super cool. And my husband and I, we make things. And per our conversation before, we like to try stuff. We're really out of the box thinkers. So literally I went to Michael's on a Saturday night and bought a frame and some moss and glued it on a board. And like a couple weeks later, all the moss fell off, but I got some good pictures of it and people were like, that's really cool. I've never seen that before. Because at the time, like in 2016, 2017, the only people that were doing this, there was one company out of California and everybody else is in Europe. So they were extraordinarily expensive. And now I understand why they cost what they do, because all of these are handmade. This isn't something that you can like manufacture, do lots and lots and lots of. And so we just started like, literally I launched a little Etsy store, and for like 2 years, I just kind of like made little projects, and it was very, very early in the moss wall trend and in the trend of biophilia. And so it was great because I jumped on board just as sort of biophilic design was taking off. Biophilic design means like designing with nature and love of nature. So in most, and now with also the trends towards wellness and other things like that, it's a really interesting moment for this kind of application. So now back, before I say, I just, snapped my, fingers and magically made a moss wall, I'd started a bunch of other companies that totally didn't work. But I learned from each one of them in terms of, what are the best, techniques, what's digital marketing. I've done everything from like commercial real estate to organic produce. And one of the things that we were talking about before we got on and started recording was, the structure of all businesses is pretty much the same. You have sales, you've got marketing, you've got finance, and you've got operations. Those are the 4 main pillars. And you have to make sure that all of those pillars as an entrepreneur are working. And so I've been in all sorts of different kinds of businesses related to a lot of different industries and seeing those kind of similarities. So whether it's moss walls or you're doing a different product, it's all the same kinds of underlying structure that you need to make it work. And through each one of my experiences and each one of my failed businesses and different career moves and all that kind of stuff, I learned different pieces that when I started creating this, I knew how to do certain things because of my collective experience. I also had been networking for 20 years. And so what I was creating lined up with my network. And so it really worked out great. I mean, I was at a networking event last night, and a woman that I've known for probably 10 years and I haven't seen for 5 years because of COVID, she said, "Oh my gosh, I've been looking, I want one of those in my office." And like, had I not been there, she probably would have gone with someone else or just not done it or that kind of thing. So it's like the serendipity of all that kind of stuff is really, really cool. And staying in touch with people over time and all of those things. It's like, that was where a lot of the impetus and a lot of the growth came from, is what I was creating met the need of what people wanted at the same time. So yeah, I mean, I'm super lucky. It's, like I said, I had 3 or 4 failed businesses before this.
Yeah.
And as you and I talked about too, it's like, you just got to get up again and
Yeah.
then pray that everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. Well, or get up again with the confidence, knowing that, well, that sucked, but I learned, and now I'm not going to do that again, and let's try something else.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that I love about being about an entrepreneur is I don't have to be in this like one little role. I don't have this one path. It's a choose your own adventure. I can do whatever I want to. I can create some cool stuff, and I'm going to fail. I'm just ready for it, which takes away the fear. I don't have a fear of failure because I know that's a way to learn, and I will figure out a way to make it go right. And I think that's what you said. I'd love to hear about some of the stuff you learned, because we all have failures. I mean, I think we've got 100 failures for every one win. And I think that's sort of a universal thing with entrepreneurs. What were some of the things you learned from your failures?
So I think, so my first failure was I was in commercial real estate during the global financial crisis, which is a nightmare. I mean, you can't imagine. I was 28 years old, $50,000 in credit card debt, which at that time was like, seemed unsurmountable.
Yeah.
Sorry, insurmountable, not unsurmountable, insurmountable.
We get it.
But I was just like, there's got to be something that works, right? So that was my first kind of failure. And it took me almost 10 years, first of all, to pay all that money back, but also, and I didn't go bankrupt because I wasn't going to do that, because I live in integrity and it's like very important to me. But I really felt that, that was, it was a really challenging thing in the sense that but I knew that I had the hustle. I knew that I had the grind. I knew that I had like this vision for like what I wanted my life to look like and to feel like, and I'm not that great of an employee. I then went and got jobs and, did better in sort of startup environments. It's a certain personality that likes the chaos of the beginning. And there's a different personality that likes maintenance and when it's all settled. I like setting everything up. The ongoing maintenance of the thing I like a lot less. I don't love like a ton of customer service. I don't love like all that kind of stuff, which is why the Moss walls are great, because they don't require a ton of customer service and follow up and all that.
Yeah.
And so I think with this whole thing, it's just like I was like determined, and where I was going with this is really like, it's okay if you take a break from entrepreneurship, especially if you've had a really rough go of it. And so I spent, probably another 10 years learning from other people and letting them pay me to learn how to do this and do it better. And in that time when I was working for other people, I learned digital marketing. I learned, more operational. I learned customer service. I learned things that I learned operations. I learned structure, all that kind of stuff, so that when it came time for my business to work, I was a little bit more set up for it. That being said, I have learned more in the last 6 years than I probably have learned, in the 20 years of college, 20 years of high school, college, elementary school, in the last 6 years, in terms of like everything that's gone wrong. Because by the time my business actually started to get some traction, which was early 2020, then the pandemic hit, and I had to run a business through all the insanity that has been the last 4 or 5 years. It has tested every ounce of my being. And then in the middle of that, I also had a baby because I'm insane. So,
Do all the things, just
We're
everything.
doing all the things. We're doing everything. Like you and I said, like, it's not the same kind of brain.
Yeah, no, it isn't. And we were talking about this earlier, where again, the pre podcast episode, we were talking about this earlier, where this is where ADHD comes in, and where it's really good as far as entrepreneurs. We're really good at starting stuff. We're good at that initial chaos because we can think in 1,000 directions at once. We're not good afterwards, and we're not good employees because we think our neuro. How do they put one day? Our neurospicy brain is very different than most people's.
Yeah.
And so, for me, I love startups, love startups. That's why I only work with entrepreneurs. I love that entrepreneur. I know how entrepreneurs work. I know what that wiring is. The joy and the energy and the passion that entrepreneurs bring to the table absolutely charges my batteries. I love that side of things. But I've also worked in regular 9 to 5 jobs. And I think taking from those 9 to 5 jobs, what I learned was, okay, now that we're transitioning from startup to actual company, that there's a transition
Exactly.
period that happens there, which can be really hard for entrepreneurs because now I have to do all of those things that I don't want to do, and that is a job. And hearing how was that transition for you? Like, what were some of the things that were going through your head? What were some of the things that you found you were good at? What were some of the things that's like, oh, that sucks. I don't ever want to do that again.
So I think, right before the pandemic hit, I signed up for a coaching course with this guy named Tim Uchek, which he does this thing called the Perfect Week.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about designing, because I was working literally, like you were saying, every weekend, nights, I wasn't delegating well. I wasn't able to like really hand things off. There was no key performance indicators. There was no, I had no way of like getting it out of my brain into like helping my team understand how they could support me beyond like making the moss.
Yeah.
And so he really taught me like this structural thing. It was the best money I have ever spent in my business. The return on that investment was like, I don't know, like 3,000% or something like that, kind of thing. Like it was really life-changing. But that process of starting to put systems in place, starting to document, starting to do all of that stuff, that was a massive project that took like almost 2 years to like actually, and then to make so that we knew the flow, we knew the system, we knew like, okay, step 1 is this, step 2 is this, step 3 is this, step 4 is this. And then we have check marks and we have quality assurance and we have all these things in place so that the product that goes out is amazing every single time. And the other thing too is that I hired a professional manager, somebody who had many years of experience. Now, some of my, Gen Z employees who had been running the show got real pissed that I brought somebody else in to help kind of keep this, increase standards, help with the process, hold people accountable, all of those things. And that was a really rough transition. I mean, the fact that he still works with me is some sort of miracle because he was dealing with all sorts of crazy. And so it's a different personality type, the one that is okay with sort of enforcing, making sure that things are going. That's not my personality. My personality is very much like, okay, I trust that you're going to do this. I trust that you're going to figure this out, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, no, you need to make sure that you're doing it this way. You know what I mean? Like, and you have to have both people on a team because if you have just all my way, nothing happens and it's kind of chaotic. And if you have it all his way, then it's like, there's not enough necessarily, like freedom,
the creative visionary, the vision stuff.
He is, like a massive asset on my, I can't, it's just been an incredible experience working with someone like that because he will literally, but he has great insights too, when, like I said, unfortunately, like my assistant who I love is leaving for personal reasons. And, the thing that he said to me is like, at first I was like, oh my God, okay, we got to just get somebody else in here. And he was like, Linz, you really need to, this is an opportunity for you to really think about what you need. And he's such a great sounding board in that way. And finding those people is really hard. When I interviewed him, I was like, I know I need you. I don't know. I don't know how this is going to go. Like literally that was the conversation. And we laugh about it to this day because he's like, it's going.
It's going somewhere. I love it. And I think,
but it's just, and it's great. Like when you find the right, and he created such calm and such goodness so that I could focus on sales and marketing, which is really like you were saying, what's your ninja skill? My ninja skill is the sales and marketing side of the business. Like, it's like, I should be at networking events every single day, which I can't do because I have a child, but getting out there, spreading the word about our business and like explaining what we do and all that kind of stuff is really what lights me up and gets me excited. dealing with accounts receivable and operational problems and all that kind of stuff.
No,
Not so much my cup of
no,
tea,
no.
kind of thing.
Does it put that in somebody else's lane that's better,
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And somebody who can take ownership of all of that. So
Yeah.
finding that next person is going to be, that's where that opportunity arises, where it's like somebody who is a great implementer, is a great doer, and also can handle like, some of the stuff that like really is just a huge pain point for me. So,
And
it's, I'm not big enough to like completely hand everything off. I'm not big enough to like hire a Fortune 500 CEO. Somebody who's coming in here is okay with the fact that it's a little bit scrappy, but I do, like I said, the one employee that I have, my studio manager, he comes from years and years and years of corporate. So he brings a lot of really amazing like perspective, because I'm running by the seat of my pants and he's saying, okay, well, hold on.
let's think about this
No,
for a
that's not
second.
how you do that.
Yes, that's 1,000 really great ideas. Which two are we going to implement?
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. Okay. Yes. Stop trying to make things other than moss walls, Lindsay. We are making moss walls. Let's go. Yeah, kind of thing.
We're not doing pink moss walls yet. Nope, we're doing this one.
Yes, exactly. Please stop. Please stop. Yes.
And having operated without that implementer, as soon as I had a business coach of mine years ago who taught me EOS, the Entrepreneur Operating System, and
Sure.
Implementer Visionary, it was brilliant. It was one of those things that you get in entrepreneurship where it explained why the traditional CEO, executive board, blah, blah, doesn't always work. And it showed a completely different way of doing it. And when you get a good implementer and you two go back and forth with that, it is a force to be reckoned with, because again, us as visionaries, we like to go out and socialize. We're going to go make the next cool thing. We're going to come up with the next cool idea. I will talk all day about what I do, like to the point that I annoy my family. But, we need that other person to kind of step in and go, okay, cool. How are we going to make this work? Like,
Yeah.
what are we focusing on? Let's and somebody who can delicately manage you, for me, it's like, you tell me, well, we're going to do this and I'm going to tell you where to go. I'm just like, okay, let's manage this.
Right. Yeah. He's like, okay, but I know you want to make that, but we have to think about these 7 items and these are going to be the challenges and those. And I'm like, okay, well,
Cool.
Let's figure it out, kind of thing. So it's a really amazing give and take. And when you have the right team and the team that like supports you and is on your team, I mean, that's been the biggest challenge, I think, too, is like, you hire the OG people. Like I had a team of 5 girls when I first started, and it was like this little family and we're doing moss and it was cute and then it was like, no, we need to become a little bit more professional. Like we are dealing with some of the top companies in the United States for this specific, and like, I do projects for Hilton and Marriott, and I do major developers, and like, we need to be problem solving constantly. And we need to make sure that we're delivering on time, and we're making sure that like the quality is a certain level, and the process for getting them design approvals and all that kind of stuff. Like that has all developed over a long period of time. And I literally had no idea that that's like even how you did this, because again, I didn't come from like a manufacturing of custom work background. Like I had no idea. I was just like winging everything. And so, technology, learning how to do project management, all that stuff is like, you're constantly learning and evolving. And I'm excited, like, because every time that I sort of learn something new and it implements and it works, it's like it catapults the company into the next level. And, another thing that I really appreciated when we were talking before this is like, what is relevant to me may not be relevant to the person who's listening to this who has 1 employee. When I have a team of 10, so there's, mostly I have a very large production team. And then I have an assistant who helps me with sales and marketing. And I have a designer, and that's it. Like, it's not a huge, operation in that sense, but what I need at 10 people is different than what I need at 5 people. Is different than what I need at, if I were to grow this thing to 20 or 30 people. I personally kind of max out right now with what I have with about 10 people. It's like, I know where everybody is. I know what's going on. It's more my person. I'm a little bit of a control freak. So it's more my personality. And the last couple of years have been weird because I had a daughter at 41 years old. So some of my priorities kind of shifted away from the business, to be very honest with you. And luckily it's like kept everybody employed and kept growing and kept going. But it's also been, I was lucky that I had this flexibility in the last 2 years. As having a toddler is really time consuming and it's really exhausting and it's super fun and amazing, but it's the best thing that I ever did, but also like one of the hardest things I've ever done. And children and businesses are very similar in that way.
Yes, exactly. And, as entrepreneurs, it's our life balance is so different. It's because for us, we are so connected with our business. It's such a part of our identity. And,
Sure.
I'm not joking when you said you left our 9 to 5 for an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. There's days when at 7 o'clock p.m. on a Sunday, I'm answering emails. And
Mhm.
it's not, a lot of people think about it as being toxic. It's not. We're just really, really embedded inside of our businesses. It is a large part of our life, and we figure out how to work around it. I've got a friend of mine who brings his 1-year-old son to speak, and it's like, it's no problem him sitting around there carrying around while speaking at an event. And, you learn a different type of work-life balance. Yeah, just different.
And
Yeah.
the other thing too, I will say is that when my husband and I did not have children,
Yeah.
we worked all the time. I
Yeah.
mean, all the time, every
Mhm.
weekend,
Yeah.
at least one day a week, we were in the office on Sundays,
Yeah.
doing stuff, fixing things. My husband actually, he owns companies too. He almost
Oh,
died from the stress from his first company.
yeah.
Literally like physically went into liver failure from the stress. And
Oh, man.
so luckily he survived, and it actually was a great wake up call for him in terms of like, okay, I can't keep functioning like this. I mean, he
Mhm.
worked for 2 years straight. When I
Yeah.
tell you he probably took the week of Christmas off or 3 days on Christmas off in 2 years, that's it. Like we
Yeah.
did not stop. And so, or more, he did not stop.
Mhm.
And so it was just, like, but then, on the flip side, everyone sees like now everything's cool. He actually sold the company that he bought, and, it's
Mhm.
all fine and da 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 da. And now he's working. It's interesting because he went from working and doing his own thing and running this company to now he's like kind of a mid-level principal in a much larger organization. And so like there's different, he's not the best employee either.
Yep.
From
Yep.
having that personality. He's a much better employee than I am though.
Yeah.
And he just does his job, and there's times where it's like, but he's very much like, he knows like, this is when I'm working on this and this is my job and I've got to be here and this is what they're
Good.
requiring of me and all that kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
it's a different level of responsibility. But the having to make payroll every 2 weeks, regardless of what's happening from a cash flow perspective, this summer
Mhm.
has been literally horrendous. I mean, when I tell you I don't know if it's the election. I don't know if it's like the Google algorithm. I don't know if it's because people are on vacation. This year has been probably the slowest we've been since 2018, 2019, like
Yeah.
so slow.
Yeah.
And, it's been a lot of like, because we work with architects, engineers, all that kind of stuff. And part of me is having to like deal with my PTSD from 2008 when I was like,
Yeah.
nothing was happening, right? And
Yeah.
everybody was losing money. And then balance that with my like optimism, like it's going to work out. Like that's
Yeah.
what I kind of felt with the other thing. And so, but the difference is now I'm responsible for 10 people. And
Yeah.
so I've had to make some decisions around, contractors and marketing staff and other things like that, that like we just can't sustain right now until, things get a little bit better. And then like today was a great day. Like we crushed it today. So,
Mhm.
I'm always like, I don't want to, 3 months, like we can sustain it. Like I save money for these periods because I realize, but it's the first time that it's been like a
I'm
period.
getting worried.
I'm getting
Yeah.
worried
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of like people that I've talked to that are like, survive to 25. Just hold on, it's gonna be okay. But it's really weird, and it's when you build something that people don't have to have like we do. I mean, we're making art with moss.
Mhm.
Nobody has to have a moss wall. Like it's just
Mhm.
not,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And so that's, one of those things where it's like, okay, well, if you don't have to have a moss wall, then, or, it's getting value engineered out right now because construction costs are very high or things like that. So it's just, it's, and with the interest rates as high as they are and everything
Mhm.
else, it's
Yeah.
just, we're all holding on, hoping that it's going to be fine. Survive
Yeah.
to 25, survive to 25 is like my little mantra right now. And we'll be fine.
Yeah.
Like I said, what's been interesting is like this year, I just knew I was like, I got to save my money because I just
Mhm.
know that like, we're going to get closer to election season and people are going to be distracted and they're going to be anxious and they're not going to want to make decisions. So I have to make sure that I have runway because when you lose people, it takes a long time to staff back up and get them up to speed.
Mhm.
And, it's just hard to find people who are okay with doing this work day in and day out.
Exactly. And I think between the interest rates rising plus election, this is just going to be a weird year. And, people are, I mean, groceries are more expensive, things like that, and a lot of ancillary services that don't do, they're like, quality of life services like, grocery stores and stuff like that. I think we're all really hurting. I know this year's been kind of a challenging year for me too, because it's just, same thing. It's like I'm in an industry that really it's not a quality of life industry. It's not something that everyone does. So I think everyone's going to go through it. So survive till 25. That's going to be my new mantra now.
And if it wasn't, I mean, I talk to my friends who are entrepreneurs because we're all in this together. People are paying a lot more money for marketing opportunities. They're paying, like they're having to adjust different things. And, they're saying, and specifically in our industry, which is building and construction, they're saying, yeah, of course, the stuff that's already kind of slated is happening, but this sort of decision-making process is just so much longer. It's insane, like much, much longer than it was before. So listen, it's just part of it. It's just part of where we are right now. And, it's an opportunity to innovate. It's an opportunity to take a look. It's an opportunity to streamline. And, hopefully people can like make it through. And yes, election years are weird. I don't ever like to make excuses based on things that I can't control. So I do try to like focus on what I can control, which is how much money I'm spending, how many projects we're accepting, what we're saying yes to, what we're saying no to, and all that kind of stuff. And, I hope it's going to be okay, but
it's going to be okay.
It's going to be okay.
We're going to figure it out. We're going to make it go right.
Exactly.
It's again, this is one of those wonderful things I like about being an entrepreneur is that, it totally sucks right now. And it's like, I have no idea what's going to happen in the future. And, everything is up in the air. And while, the election year is a reason why this is happening, we need to look at what we're actually going to be able to accomplish and actionable items to be able to do it. And there might be a pivot. There might be something different. I'm in the middle of a pivot right now because it was one of those moments where it's like, I need to do something. But it's one of those things that I love about it is we have the resourcefulness, we have the grit, we have the determination, and just sheer chutzpah. It's the Yiddish word for just guts to do this, and we can make it go right. And I think that's something that is a freedom that most people don't have, or especially people not in a 9-to-5 job. They don't have that level of freedom.
Yeah. And I don't ever really like to shit on 9-to-5 jobs because I think that like, you have to just know yourself. Yeah. I know myself. I know the kind of personality that I am. And I know that, if I'm working in a great team, like I could be a good employee, but it's just really not my personality. So there are plenty of people who really prefer, like, I don't know if you've ever done DISC assessments and things like that. They prefer stability and consistency. Like that is a happy thing for them. Yeah. And they like it too, and they get very uncomfortable in the unknown. Mine is like, you're fine. You do not care at all.
You're a C or an I, you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah, exactly. I'm literally DI, mostly I, but some dominant, but mostly influencing.
I'm high I, so yep.
Zero stability, zero consistency, none. Literally like none. So everyone I try and hire on my team is heavy on the other two. Because I find that when people are very heavy on the other two, then they're okay with this sort of day-to-day, we've just got to execute on these tasks. It's fine doing the same thing over and over and over again, because that's what the rhythm is. I mean, that's basically what, once you get past the chaos in the beginning and figuring it all out, then it's literally repeating the same exercise over and over and over again. And in our case, it's like, we can do a moss ceiling, the process for making a moss ceiling with ferns hanging down and or the moss logo, like all of those things are, it's exact same design process that we go through. It's the exact same production process we go through. It's the exact same quality assurance process we go through. Even though it's like every piece is unique and different, it's the same process behind those. And, we've got that down to like, a really good machine, and it took forever to get there.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting towards the end of things here, and I do have one question I like to ask every person, so we can give back to the audience, and that is, what is one book or podcast that has had a major impact on your life?
I love How I Built This by Guy Raz. He is, it's just cool to hear these very normal people like me who have like, obviously they get major funding, they blow up. And I listened to the podcast that the Siete Foods people did recently.
Yeah.
And I was just touched by like their humanity and their, like, they work as a family to do basically gluten-free and dairy-free Mexican food. They saw in their communities that there really wasn't a lot of options for, for their community to have tortillas and other things like that. And so, but it was like their story about how they were like pushing tortillas by themselves. And then they got like other people to push their tortillas, and then they got a tortilla machine, and then they got like $1 bazillion of funding, and,
and they make a good tortilla.
And they make a great really tortilla. And their whole thing is, and they're one of their major premises is together is better. And I actually stole that from the podcast, is like, together is better. I mean, Green Wallscapes is not me. Green Wallscapes is me plus all the people that make the company and make the pieces. I don't actually make the moss. My team is much better at making the moss than I do. I make the phone calls. I do the accounts receivable. I make sure the insurance is in place. I do all the boring stuff that makes it like so that they can really execute on a very, very high level. And so that's really what my job is now. I started making the moss. I make cute little moss walls, like whatever. I mean, and I know what I want, like in terms of the level of finish and in terms of like how it needs to look. But I am not the one anymore that's actually doing that. And so that's been an amazing learning experience. And I am just blessed to have just an incredible team. And so together is better. That's the whole thing.
I love that. Mine is life is a team sport.
Yeah.
Same thing. I love it. Yeah. It's all a team. We come together. We build really great stuff. So Lindsay, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate it.
Fun.
This was great.
I hope it wasn't too like all over the place, because I can be a little bit like that.
we're all like that. It's all good.
So have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks again for joining us on the Hustle and Grind podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Lindsay, check out the links in the description.